Okay, so welcome to Youth Voices for Nature Restoration. We are super happy to have you. We have participants actually from all over the planet joining us. We are representing in all continents. We have people joining mostly from Spain, which is kind of normal. We have people from Indonesia, people from Pakistan, people joining also from South America, Venezuela. So if you want, you can put your name in the chat and let us know from where you're listening. Now let's kickstart our session with the agenda of the day. So first of all, I will be giving you a quick introduction with some kind of house rules. Then I will present the different speakers that we have today. Then we move forward to Generation Climate's Europe position on youth and the nature restoration law. Then we'll be joined by Fernando, representing the Spanish presidency, telling us a bit more of insight about the law and its coming up vote. Then we'll move on to our youth part of the session, part 2, and finally we'll give a last part, which will be dealing with improving implementing nature restoration after what we've moved forward, and then we'll be moving to the closing statement, sadly, and the conclusion of the day. So regarding the housekeeping rules, so please keep your mic muted unless you are speaking. Raise your hand, or you can also put your question in the chat if you're a bit shy. So we'll just wait it for you, or just wait to be given the floor. So now moving forward, why are we doing this dialogue? So we are doing this dialogue because we want to ensure that your voices are heard, because the EU decision-making processes is kind of difficult to get into, even if you're either involved into it or you're just like us, young people. So what we wanted to do is create a safe space and inclusive interaction between representatives of the Council Presidency and youth people from all over Europe. So we are focusing on youth participation in climate and environmental policy making. And we are representing Generation Climate Europe, so which is the largest coalition of youth-led networks at the European level. We've over, now I think it's more than 20 million young people now, because we had the new board members joining, and we work on different areas: clean mobility, of course, nature restoration with our biodiversity team, that's from which you will hear today, climate justice, sustainable developments, and circular economy. So moving forward, I would like to present to you our speakers of the day. So joining us is Karin. So Karin works as an advisor at the Saami Council in the EU unit, mainly focusing on forest issues. She was born and raised in Xabier, the Swedish part of Saami. She's from a reindeer herding family in Saami village. So I think you can guess from that nature is really important to her. She was a degree of a Bachelor of Science with a major in Forest Science and a Master in Land Use and Environmental Law. And she's currently pursuing a master degree in forestry. And while she's not working, she also has some hobbies. She's like snowboarding, country skiing, and being with her family and friends. So representing the Spanish presidency, we have Dr. Fernando Magdaleno, who currently works as Deputy Director General of Terrestrial and Marine Biodiversity for the Ministry for the Ecological Transition and Demographic Change of Spain. He has worked on a wide number of public policies and programs which were related to protection, multidimensional restoration of rivers and wetlands. So we're gonna probably talk about that today. About water bodies, interaction between land, water, and biodiversity. Then we'll be joined by a member from the Spanish Youth Council, Xabier, that will be taking over from Pablo. Unfortunately, he had some other commitments, so he will join us a bit later. And we will have, last but not least, from our panel, Yeah, making sure the slide is moving. Okay. Sorry for that. So as I was saying, like we have Bernard Noah joining project lead on nature restoration. He has a postgraduate degree in conservation and is particularly interested in aquatic science, rebuilding in the power of local communities in harnessing nature-based solution. So now over to the nature restoration team. We'll start with Jakob presenting.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Maybe just go to the slide before that. That's where I start. Well, thank you everybody for joining. I will just present a short overview of the regulation so that we are all on the same level. So the nature restoration law, oh, maybe the one before it. Sorry. Well, all right, let's just start. So the nature restoration law, it is a really special proposal as it would be the first EU-wide regulation to include legally binding measures for restoring Europe's ecosystems. And in that, the regulation is a key element of the EU biodiversity strategy, which itself is key in achieving the goals of the Green Deal. So you have frameworks adding up. And adding on to that, it is vital in aligning European environmental policy with the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Protocol, which was agreed upon at COP15 last year. If it would be implemented, it is proposal now, it would be a real breakthrough, not only for biodiversity protection, but also for climate mitigation, as it entails binding targets to restore degraded ecosystems with the most potential to capture and to store carbon. And the original proposal, which I will go over shortly, it calls for the restoration of at least 20% of the EU's land and maritime areas by 2030, and of all ecosystems which are in bad to poor quality by 2050. Now just presenting a short timeline. On the 20th of June, 2022, the law was first endorsed by member states through the Environment Council, and 2 days later, on the 22nd of June, it was formally proposed by the European Commission, and it swiftly sparked controversy because members of the Parliament's Committee on Agriculture and Fisheries, as well as the European People's Party, framed it as a threat to agriculture, to forestry, and to fishery. And following these setbacks and these misinformation campaigns, on June the 27th of this year, it sadly failed to reach a majority in the Committee on the Environment, with 44 votes being in favor of it and 44 against it. But finally, on the 12th of July, a majority was reached in the Parliament to adopt a severely weakened version of the proposal. This was in summer, and from summer to up until the 10th of November, this version of the regulation, the one that was accepted in Parliament, was the subject of trilogues between the Parliament, the Council, and the Commission. And yes, now you have the timeline again. There it is. Yes, as you see, up until the 10th of November, it was a subject of these negotiations. And the greatest attention hereby was paid to Article 9, the restoration of agricultural ecosystems, where the Commission and the Council had very ambitious targets. But in contrast to that, the parliamentary position, which was accepted in July, it envisaged the complete deletion of this very important article, without which the regulation has no real effect. And our eyes are now set on the 29th of November, so this will be in a couple of days, when the Committee on Environment will vote on this newly compromised text, which was agreed upon at the trilogues, and which my colleague Erica will present shortly. Now Fenja will tell you a little bit about the work that GCE that we have done on this law.
Thank you. So yeah, as Jakob just mentioned, we were really involved during the whole process, and I will try to sort of fill in the timeline that Jakob just presented. So we published a position paper before and after the proposal by the Commission. asking or demanding an ambitious nature restoration law that includes youth. We also advocated for an ambitious law at the Youth Climate and Sustainability Roundtable and at the European Parliament Youth Dialogue that we organized, where we invited MEPs, for example, César Luena, who's the rapporteur of the law, and who we also met at the European Parliament in May. And then leading up to the vote in the Environmental Committee in June and the plenary vote in July, we did a lot of advocacy work that included a lot of email writing to relevant MEPs, social media campaigns. We also joined the Restore Nature campaign. We published a joint statement with other youth organizations. We then again published a statement after the plenary vote. Fast forward to now, where we're hosting the Council Presidency Youth Dialogue, bring together the Spanish presidency and young people, because we do believe that young people should be as informed as possible and as included as possible. So our demands were that youth should be explicitly recognized as an important stakeholder in the law, that the regulation should ensure young people are included in the implementation and planning of national restoration plans, and that ambitious action is taken by 2030 to ensure intergenerational equity. We believe that young people should be included as a stakeholder because young people are the ones that suffer disproportionately from inaction, from harmful action, from environmental degradation, but also because young people are already the next generation of change makers. We do have the necessary skills and the needed knowledge for needed restoration measures and environmental protection. And we should also be more included in the whole decision-making process, because those decisions will affect young people's futures more than anyone's. But the law at the moment does not mention youth at all, and it is definitely a far cry from what is needed to address the crises we're facing of biodiversity loss and environmental degradation. Even the compromise text, but Erica will now talk a bit more in detail about the outcomes of the trilogues and our position on it.
Thank you. Next slide again. Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. So, as Fenja just explained, we closely followed the development of the law and discussions around it, and we think there are still some challenges that make the law difficult to implement and non-binding. So the points that I'm going to expose are those that concern us the most. First of all, the absence of an obligation to non-deterioration. Co-legislators have agreed on an effort-based non-deterioration requirement. That means that no result is expected or due. Moreover, it will only apply to those areas that are already under restoration, while member states should commit to non-deteriorate all ecosystems. Second, an ambiguous emergency break for peatlands. Indeed, the restoration of drained peatland has been reintroduced, but there is a high degree of flexibility. Exceptions can be made for those states that rely on peatlands for economic opportunities and if adoption proves challenging. Also, it's worth nothing if this requirement don't apply to private landowners. Even if restoration measures are not limited to Natura 2000 sites, there is a heavy reliance on them. Indeed, the targets agreed are the restoration of at least 30% of ecosystems by 2030, 60% of habitats in poor condition by 2040, and at least 90% by 2050. In 2021, Natura 2000 sites covered 18% of EU land and 9% of its maritime territory, meaning that these sites will be useful to reach the target by 2030, but not the longer-term targets. Fourth, the assessment of the state of forest ecosystems relies only on two mandatory indicators that are standing and lying deadwood and the common forest bird index. while little is known about the other 5 indicators that the Commission originally proposed as mandatory as well. Last, access to justice. The lack of reassurance on the application of this principle leaves us concerned about the compliance with the law itself. Indeed, while the Commission proposed this principle, this principle in Article 16, the amended text voted by the European Parliament in July doesn't, and it only mentions it in the preamble. Next slide, please. Also, we must highlight that the debate over nature restoration law has been biased and hampered by misinformation. One main threatening argument was that the law will lead to food insecurity, while there is scientific evidence that demonstrates the opposite is true. Indeed, today's biggest threat to food security is climate change, the loss of biodiversity, the loss of ecosystem services such as pollination. This is the one we know the most. While their conservation and their restoration will lead to functional diversity in agricultural landscapes, will stabilize microclimates, reduce soil erosion, and combat pollution. We therefore urge the Council to promote a law that is as ambitious as possible in order to ensure the resilience of European ecosystems, food security and food systems, and also to ensure a livable future for younger generations.
Thank you to Nature Restoration team for presenting. I hope now you have a bit more of context and especially an idea of our position. So not taking more time now, I would like to give the floor to Fernando. So we'll deal with now the first part of the dialogue, which will be ambitious and effective nature restoration regulation. So we will be trying to answer some of the guiding questions that we have sent, such as, can you give us some insight that we really want to know of what happened during the trialogues? As of now, you have a bit of a presentation of what happened to the law. How can the nature restoration law contribute to achieving EU climate targets and protection of biodiversity? Also a bit of a focus on agriculture, as it is one of the main drivers behind biodiversity laws. So to what extent Article 9 contribute to restoration of ecosystem, as it is now based on an effort base instead of a result-based approach. Also, how can we ensure accountability for member states and the binding goals will be achieved on time? So Fernando, over to you, and I will be sharing your presentation as well.
So thank you so much, Mary, and the rest of the Youth Council team for inviting me here this evening. I'm really grateful for this invitation and also happy to share with you my views, my perspectives about this complex but absolutely crucial time for nature and people in the UE. This regulation, as you were mentioning before, has a lot of uncertainties in terms of how we all member states will be able to reach the goals which are multiple and really hard to face in many cases. But we need those goals. We need to articulate in a shared way these goals, and we have to compromise to reach them in the quite narrow time we have under the umbrella of the calendar of this regulation. Next, please. Some of you already mentioned these questions, but we are facing an environmental and climatic crisis and difficult moment in our continent, in the UE, and also a social situation which is partially based on that environmental and climatic challenge. We know today that over 80% of habitats are in poor status in the EU ecosystems, that every euro invested into nature restoration adds a larger amount of benefits and co-benefits to nature and people. And for some specific taxons and species like bees and butterflies, we have an incredible decline, which is also challenging, not just for ecosystem, but also for agriculture and for other activities. And that we have an ecosystem of different regulations, which we should be using in an integrated and combined way. We cannot be just using the Kunming-Montreal framework or the biodiversity strategy in an isolated way. And we also have to face the way to integrate the farm to fork strategy, European Green Deal, the directives of the UE, including nature, water, and marine directives, and other different forest, soil, connectivity, desertification initiatives, which also can be useful and helpful to have a combined approach to those major challenges that we have to face. So we need to understand all those different tools that we can have in our hand and use them in an integrated way to cope with those major threats that I was commenting before. Next slide, please. So the restoration regulation can contribute in many ways to the achievement of these goals. And it does these things despite all the things you were referring before, that it includes high flexibility in the way we can manage those goals, or that there are some ecosystems for which the time targets are quite long in time, but not so long if we consider our generation approach. But for me, the main driver of this regulation is that it promotes a new approach to the integration of sectoral and environmental policies. For many years, we have sectoral policies quite isolated, quite fragmented from environmental policies, and this regulation makes possible that for each different sectoral policy, there must be a commitment to contribute to restoration. So for me, this is one major hint which should be considered as a positive aspect of this regulation. So it helps to promote the nexus approach, which brings together land, water, biodiversity, climate, soil, and also the appalling targets of food and energy in our countries. So for me, this is a major aspect, a win-win aspect of this regulation. And also an additional question is that it's not just based on, as it was the fundamentals in the last year of promoting, constructing pilot cases for restoration. On the contrary, it includes restoration in all the ordinary management of the different socio-environmental systems we have in our countries, including forests, grasslands, cities, coastal areas, seas, rivers, wetlands, and even crop fields. So this is also quite essential because it not just looks at restoration in very natural places, but also brings the obligation of restoring ecosystems which are in populated areas and very degraded areas. So for me, this main goal of restoring 20% of our ecosystems by 2030 is, as you may see, quite important, despite all those flexibilities and uncertainties that you were commenting before. Next, please. In terms of agriculture, it is true that that Article 9 was one of the major discussive issues for some weeks. It was out of the text. Then it came back again after this third trialogue, which was held last 9 of November, and which we could agree between the co-legislators to agree to a consensus text. This Article 9 came into action again into the text, which I think was absolutely essential. It could not be left behind from all the rest of the habitat types and ecosystem types. And the way in which these agricultural ecosystems will promote and contribute to the restoration goals will be based on the national restoration plans, which must be developed in a few months' time in each member state. And those national plans will be the documents which introduce the specific processes and procedures to make the overarching goals possible and feasible in each member state and in each type of habitat. So in that time, in a few months' time, there will be time for you and for all stakeholders to promote your insights, your views, to make the main goals of the regulation feasible, possible, measurable in each member states and in each habitat type, including these agro ecosystems. Of course, it was in terms of the environmental side of the question, it was much better to promote a result-based approach, but this was considered for some member states unfeasible. According to that, we have to restore 20% of the land and sea areas of each country. So it was for many of them difficult to interpret that they could, in a few years' time, restore effectively and in a resulted way 20% of all their land and sea areas. So the agreed consensus was on, okay, let's invest enough money, enough energy in restoring those 20% sites, but we will not be considered we have to reach a successful restoration in all terms, because it could be not reach that goal due to different climatic, technical questions, to different things. So it was like too hard for some member states to interpret that should be a demand on results. So we all agreed finally to reintroduce agrosystems, but to do it in an effort-based approach. And this, it will of course need a well-coordinated, well-monitored in a transparent way. We need transparency to make people see what each member state is investing, what is each member state is adopting and reaching, and this will be the best way to cope with that flexibility, which could be used in a not positive way, but we think that coordination, monitoring, transparency, and trust should be the give the solution and be the rest of the work. Next and final, please.
Yeah, if you can just wrap up so we have time for just quick reaction. Thank you.
Okay. And just this final slide, which is about how we can ensure accountability for member states of that binding goals. I highlight that we will have to promote and achieve the goals of each national restoration plans, that we need monitoring which is oriented to transformation. We have to make surveillance to make sure that those goals are being reached. And of course, the only way to reach to that shared crucial goal is to commit in political and social terms in all member states. This is not a regulation to be made just for a few number of countries. We need all member states to contribute, to commit to the shared goal with the shared solutions and with the shared effort. So we need all of us in this regulation, not just southern or northern or eastern or western countries. We need all of them inside. We all face complexities, but there are no excuses. We all have the capacity, the ability to transform land and water and seas and to make change. And for this, my last word would be that for such amazing challenge, we need science. In all cases, we have to found to base all decisions on science and to make thus a transparent, to create a transparent ecosystem for that change and to make it participatory. We need people to be part of this path. We cannot do this just from ministries, from NGOs, from specific technical teams. We need all people inside. We need people to understand which is the message, which is the co-benefit of restoration. This is not just a scientific, academic way of thinking. This creates change, and this creates co-benefits for nature and people. So we need to involve all of us, individuals, citizens, entities, organizations, and to share hands to reach those targets. And as a very brief and schematic initial perspective, this would be my initial hints. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you, Fernando. I think everybody agrees that we need everyone to restore nature, that we cannot continue without nature, so we need to protect it and do it based on science evidence, of course. And we'll be pushing for more. And also you mentioned trust. I believe that now we will need trust with the upcoming parliament election. What the council and all the other EU institutions will do, they will be judged by the young citizens. So is there any reaction maybe from Noah or any participant that would like to maybe ask some question or just react?
Before the questions arrive, just let me say a final sentence, which is a fresh news for all of you, and is that this morning the COREPER, which is the council discussion table with all member states, agreed on the terms of the last version of the regulation, and the one which emerged from the November 9th trialogue. So now the member states, the council has agreed, and we just are pending on the decision of the parliament.
Okay, that's very new. So we really need the law to pass before the upcoming election. So I do not see any questions. Since we started, I think, a bit late, maybe we can move on to our next panel, so we have more time. So our next panel will be led by Xabier and Karin on youth and nature restoration. They will be giving you some insight about indigenous communities, or how do young people already contribute to promote nature restoration? How would you like to see actually young people involved? So as Fernando mentioned, there's an apparently opportunity with the national plans where we can give some input, which barriers still exist that prevent youth involvement in nature restoration. Some maybe example of youth involvement, and last but not least, maybe the needs and the rights of those local communities. So Karin, over to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me and letting me talk on this event. I would just start a little bit about the needs and a little bit about the history and how we have it here in the Arctic. I just wanted to say, as a Saami indigenous people of the Arctic, the climate crisis really resonates deeply in our daily lives. We are really the first that impacts the rising tides, eroding coasts, warming waters, and unpredictable weather patterns. And as a reindeer herding, I'm coming from a reindeer herding family. We are outside in the forest, in the nature every day, and see this happen, and have seen this happen for a long time, and been warning these cases for a long time. And forests, like the bedrock of our nature, are integral of Saami way of life. A healthy forest is just not essential for the ecological perspective. It's also essential for our culture, and especially reindeer husbandry, which is the bedrock, but also for the whole food system and the providing stability, health, and wellness. So it's really important that we have this restoration in order, and it's good for us and in our ways. And traditionally, our response has been moved by animals to old forest and tree-hanging lines, and then we see this has disappeared. It last 60 years, 71% of the ground lichen, which is crucial for reindeer husbandry, has disappeared. So therefore, it's really important to nature restoration for us, and as everyone knows, the negative trend. But moving over to how some youth involvement restoration is doing, like traditional ways of just living the life in reindeer husbandry and traditional knowledge out in the nature, but also new ways of activism and organizing each other with communities. And also Sápmi is not only one country. We are a pan organization, the Saami Council, but also youth involvement between cross-border countries, because Sápmi is in Norway, Finland, Sweden, and also a part of Russia. So we are fighting for our rights. But we have seen this, it is limited access to resources, and also lack of representation in decision-making bodies. And there is a really systematic challenge, and also by that, a lot of discrimination and unequal power dynamics, especially when we are a minority. We're not always included, and always for us, we can see there is a gap by understanding between older and younger generation regarding the value of integration of traditional knowledge with modern approaches, which is really important when you are taking this into account when restoring. So I really want to highlight that now when we're coming this to national plans, governments have to prioritize inclusive policies that actively involve young Saami people and young from diverse backgrounds, which includes more diversity and more knowledge about this. And also it's really important when it comes to our traditional knowledge, talking about epic, free, prior, and in consent. For Saami people, inclusion should adhere to rights, and this is rights based by epic standard, and it's not like non-negotiable right to consent and conditional consent or refusal of consent. We have to be involved in an early stage to have our rights and knowledge heard by that. Thank you.
Thanks. Then over to you, Xabier.
Hi. Well, first of all, I need to explain a little what is a National Youth Council. So I am from the National Youth Council of Spain. That is basically the legal representation of all of the Spanish youth. We are an umbrella organization that groups 17 regional youth council and more than 50 youth organizations. And because of that, we are created by law, but we are private organization, and we have the moral responsibility and the legal responsibility by law to represent youth in Spain. And as representatives of Spanish youth, we bring normally different perspectives when we meet our ministries, and when we go and speak specifically in this topic, we are prioritizing the adaptation of climate change in the European context in general. And it's something that we have been endorsing to our Ministry of Ecological Transition that Fernando was representing earlier. And then we are showing some different impacts on the past, actually showing and having a law that it's having this like first ever natural restoration law. It's something that is actually nice to see, specifically because normally, and it's something that probably not in this meeting, but in general in the society, we need to dispel the misconception that climate change adaptation is only a concern of the global youth. Like Europe is also gaping and having a lot of alarming rates of biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation. And it's something that it's been impactful for us. And we are in general advocating a lot for it, and not only advocating, creating awareness for it. And if we go a little on if our collective efforts should be centering in strong strategies, we could be like, oh yes, a natural restoration law, it's a really good, impactful measure, but it's not the only thing that we need. And like when we speak about climate change, like winning slowly means losing, and it's something that we are actually advocating on. And then if we go probably on the topic that we are sending, what are we as a National Youth Council also impacting? We are recently, well, not only recently, for the past year, emphasizing our stance on ecocide. Specifically, we are advocating a lot for the classification as an ecological crime, because it's still not recognized, and it's actually a big problem right now, because like if there is still a need of recognizing the connection between the environmental rights and human rights. And actually, we've been on cooperation actually with some of our lovely partners in crime from Latin America, specifically from Chile, where they have an amazing Escazú agreement and have some human rights recognition on environmental. And they are actually the civil society who is actually for a long time having pressure on it, and actually showing us how our youth effort can make impact directly into advocacy. And it's something really interesting to see. So for the past years, we've been advocating also to the European Commission. We've been like making specifically efforts to our Ministry of Ecological Transition. And then like being part actually, and that's something really interesting, when you are part normally as a negotiator or as a even party overflow of your ministry on COPs or different, or in Bonn or in different international events, you are slowly able to impact the different documents and situation. And we see that European Union still doesn't have the enough like commitment to like climate action, but we do think that there is slowly a change on it, and we are happy for it. And if you want to know something, you can ask me a question about how we do specifically advocacy on different spaces, because I do have a lovely team of 7 people that do advocacy on international action, and a lot of them, they are really into climate action, and we are advocating for it for long. So maybe I have some other good practice to explain you or other things.
Thanks, Xabier. That sounds super interesting. I think everybody's looking forward to having a bit more insight of really the impact that youth can make, like from any background. Like we heard from Karin about the Saami youth, that we also need inclusion for all communities that are usually marginalized and are not part of the negotiation. They should be able to sit at the table. But we know that it's also difficult because you're in the European Union, you have 27 member states to actually 26 now agree on with. So it might be difficult because you need to take into account all the differences of the member states. Some wants more, some wants less. So moving forward, I think we can open just a panel discussion for everyone to maybe join, and also maybe asking of like possibilities of ecosites is actually been coming up a lot because the European Union actually adopted last week a directive on to create more environmental crimes, but there hasn't been really the word ecocide being used. So do you think like ecocide would be used for nature restoration when you actually impact those protected areas, or that what would be the impact of it? Maybe it will be one of the questions. And how would you like to see youth maybe of if the nature restoration law falls maybe a bit short of what it actually is needed? Maybe Noah, you want to react?
I can just continue as I didn't mention it earlier, and for those who maybe not know, but we are, the Saami people are the only recognized indigenous people within the EU, and what we can see is falling short or actually needed and not really in the regulation at the moment is the FPIC and UNDRIP. It's not the strong language for our needs and our knowledge, which is not taken into account. And when we're talking about nature restoration, we are a people living together with the nature and having our traditional herding, traditional reindeer herding, and our traditional fisheries and so on. So we have also the solutions when it comes to restore, and we have been restoring for immemorial the nature. So it's a lot of things that should have been with the regulation, and hopefully we can see in the national, as I said, we hope that we will be more included and have our rights and our knowledge to be taken into account when it comes to measurements and how to do it on the ground in the forest, for example. Thank you.
for us it's a little different in that point of view, because like we actually sometimes advocate a lot on restoration, but on not how to do it, because in Spain in general we are, well, in European Union it's not that typical situation, because every country has directly impact, and normally the youth organization don't impact other countries like restoration on climate change. But in Spain we have specifically two like big eco spaces that are having big impact on pollution, and that the climate action organization that are been advocating a lot on restoration for it. Actually, like the ministry finally put some effort onto it, and then they put some money for one specific project. Probably Fernando will speak more about it, because like last year they were explaining to us how it was designed. It was this year specifically being implemented. But in general, what I can say is that there are not really big examples, I will say, in Spain on good restoration plans. In general, are the how can we block in the moment that a big oil company or something that it's polluting strongly, it's happening, how can we prevent that to happen? It's something that we are putting more effort now, because and it's a problem, as we are speaking here in this meeting. In general, we should have more impact on start rebuilding and restoration our nature, than instead of having to solve like our climate action problem situation.
Yeah, maybe Fernando, you want to reply to that? Do you have good example of restoration?
Yes, thank you all. It is true that in the past there were just a few minor pilot cases of restoration of different ecosystems, but the last decade has been absolutely the moment of change in that aspect. The rate of restoration activities, the dimension of the case we have been providing is really vast today. So, for instance, we have, if I don't recall in a bad manner, about like 800 small dams which have been removed or permeabilized in our country, which is really large amount, 800. Of course, we have maybe over 30,000 or even 50,000. And there are some voices which speak about 2 million obstacles in rivers in the whole EU atmosphere or ecosystem. But for Spain, which is a country which is really facing droughts and scarcity in a harsh way, this is a lot. Or for instance, in the last few years have seen the restoration of 20,000 hectares of wetlands, or some other examples which show the idea that the past was not really based on restoration, but the last 5-10 years have seen a real change in the way we are managing land and water. Of course, there are reactions to that change. There are many people who are resisting against restoration because they think it could be hampering their own economic activities. But I think there is a positive perspective for restoration today. And we have understood that it's not against people or against land activities, is within or is with people and with activities and even contributing that agriculture or forestry or other activities can be guaranteed in the future. So I think there are some bright rays in the future, which could be like a positive or optimistic side of the question.
Thank you. I think that's why also we are all here, because we are hopeful of we can make changes that are needed, even if it's going to be a tough decision of which changes we need to do. But I think everybody is on board of making those changes. So maybe someone from the nature restoration team that wants to react or add some comments.
Yeah, if not, I will ask also a question, which is actually building on this point that Karin made. Definitely, it's about the inclusion of well, the indigenous people in their case, but it also in general in people who have an interest in nature restoration. And even though this may not be the European level might maybe not be the most appropriate to do that, how do we ensure that basically on the national level in nature restoration plans there is really this recognition of we need to work together with local communities, especially with those with a close connection in nature, and also of course with young people, if young people are a relevant actor there. So I just want to, maybe there's a question to Fernando as well, like how do you see, is this ensured in the implementation on the national level? But maybe also from Karin or Xabier, if you want to intervene, how do we ensure that, well, there's actually an appropriate dialogue? Is there any good example there, or what would you like to see?
Yes, thank you. It's a really good question, and of course, in the first start, have the knowledge. When I'm coming to different parts of Europe, we don't. The people even don't know that European Commission have, or not European, sorry, Europe has a indigenous people. So when talking and having meetings and writing articles, or maybe having some impacts on that, recognize us. And also there is several youth organizations to take contact and maybe do collaboration and having webinars together, and because we are still fighting for the same cases, and also because we are minorities, it's very important that bigger organization makes our voices heard. And by doing that, it's just contact our youth organization both in Finland, Sweden, and Norway, and yeah, just continue and ask, what can we do? Can we help you with this? How do you have any inputs when you have this restoration plan, or this text is coming now? What do you think about this? And yeah, making connections. I think it's really important by different NGOs that wants a better future for the climate and nature.
I will also ask a little. I will say that what we can do, like, first of all, like when we go into European Union, there is a lovely motto, unite in diversity. Like, so European Union is supposed to be having a priority on the inclusion of all of the different realities. And that also means that we normally, like, it is really difficult to get consulted and informed all of the diversity that we have around. And then I will not go into, like, we don't have that problem where it's really difficult to get indigenous getting informed or participated in the decision making, like our Latin American friends. We do have like ethnicity groups that they are not participating. And then I will say that in general, like we as a youth, we are not consulted or informed enough, and we are not part of the decision making. And something that is really important as climate change, that is our future and our present actually. So in that topic, I will say that there's been efforts on to having more consultation, but there is never enough pressure from youth to be part of the decision making, and from youth to be enough diverse and having different voices included. And you can see, like, in general, or mostly meeting or youth representatives that we have, even when EU Commission brings youth to have consultations, mostly of them, they are not really representatives, that there are a minority on the like, they are the privileges ones. And that's something that we are facing in general. So it's a topic, it's a priority probably, and it's a priority for us to get everyone involved and get everyone consulted. So thanks you for your question, Milan, because it's actually a priority that we are not solving enough.
Thank you, Milan. From my side, I think that a very bad image of this regulation is that would contribute to division between people. We are living a time of polarization, of division in our continent, and this is really really threatening atmosphere, which could bring behind really extremist and radical views of specifically certain particular political parties. So restoration is based on equity, is based on diversity, is based on inclusion. So both three things should include intergenerational equity, economic, social, between genders, between all people who wants to live together. We cannot have restoration as a tool which brings division between city people and rural people thinking that city dwellers are obliging them to restore the land and the water and the seas which were degraded by former activities. So it's important that we communicate the co-benefits of restoration, that we bring people inside this tool and of the benefits it brings, including indigenous people, local communities, and all the different generational layers, which has to be part of the solution, to avoid really that this is solved by some people, by some interests, as a way for dividing people and for bringing behind, as I was saying, parties which are just threatening the welfare and the coexistence of all the diversity we have in our continent. So for me, it's important that it's not used in a bad, wrong way, but in a positive, in an optimistic way to bring people together, not to confront them between each other.
Thank you all. So maybe for the last words, handing out to the nature restoration team from GC, if you want to add something. I will also be sharing that they've been preparing also a policy brief that I will put in the chat so you can look at it.
Yes, so thank you so much for joining. I think we did gain some very useful insights, both from the policy side, but also from the Indigenous and youth perspective. So yeah, I'm really grateful for all of your insights and everything you said, and I do think we can be hopeful about the future of nature restoration. And hopefully people will be brought to the table, both Indigenous and youth, when it comes to national restoration plans. So if you have any more questions, please do feel free to email us via the email address that is on the screen right now. We have written a council brief that is sort of aimed at the council and that represents what Erica presented earlier. So the main outcomes of the trilogues and our position on it. If you're a bit patient, there will be social media posts coming up where we also will link a blog post where we do talk about the nature restoration law a bit more broadly, and also the state where it's at the moment. And of course, we will closely follow the future development. So we're really happy that it was endorsed this morning, and now we're looking forward to the votes coming up in the Envy Committee, which we saw earlier in summer was really close. So we have our fingers crossed it's gonna get through this time. And yes, again, thanks everyone, especially to the panelists. That was fantastic, and thank you for all the participants as well.
Yeah, thank you all. We finished a bit late, but still make it on time. So thank you all. And we count on the Spanish presidencies as being actually quite stressful, I guess, for you with election coming up while you just started the presidency, waiting for the outcomes. And also we count on you, and we are sure that you're going to do a great job. And let's hope that the vote will be positive in the parliament.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.